Hello everybody and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol roster building video, and today we are building a little bit more unique of a list here, and the idea behind this list is basically we're going to be taking the second Black Panther leadership or King T'Challa here, and we're going to be trying to make a list that has every single character pretty much on the team pushing characters as often as possible. Now it is only once per turn, so being able to push a character twice in one turn won't really factor into it, but we will be kind of considering if a character has more than one way of pushing a character that could be valuable. So, maybe they have pushes on their attacks, but they also have a superpower. It gives you kind of some flexibility that way versus a character that only has it on attacks. So yeah, with that said, we're going to go ahead and start with, of course, King T'Challa here. And we want to have at least a few Wakandan characters, so that way we can... Oh, I misspelled Wakanda. There we go. That way we can run this in the affiliation and use that leadership. So I think the first one's very, very obvious. We're going to be including Shuri here. Automatic pushes on the Panther Gauntlets just makes a lot of sense. And yeah, why wouldn't we? And then outside of that, as far as Wakandan characters go, unfortunately we can't bring this Black Panther, who would absolutely love the leadership, so instead we are going to have to settle for some other characters here, but thankfully we do have a few other good options, such as M'Baku here, who has that crit push on his main attack here. So yeah, I mean he's got the ability to do that, so he already fits the bill. And yeah, that just kind of works. So we'll go ahead and throw him in. Technically, he is another leader option, but that's not really the point, so not really what we're doing. Beyond this, I am kind of debating whether or not I want to throw in either Okoye or Storm. Neither of them have the ability to push that I'm aware of, but having an extra affiliated model just to be able to kind of play around at different threat levels a little bit easier might be a good idea. Or we just say this is the core, this is the core that gets brought every single game. And I mean, as a 12 threat core, that does seem pretty solid, so I don't hate that. I think for now, in the interest of staying thematic, we're going to go ahead and pick 7 unaffiliated characters to be in the rest of the list. But just kind of something to keep in mind if you're trying your own version of this. Maybe also throw a Okoye in there or something like that, just to make your options a little bit more open for some different threat levels. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and start getting into some of the pushy characters that we can shove in here. So one of the first things I want to consider here is characters that are capable of pushing enemy characters outside of their own turn. I think they're going to be a lot more interesting for this list than just characters that have pushes on attacks, and we're definitely going to have some of those as well, somewhat unavoidable for a list like this. We just don't have enough in the game that kind of have pushes through more unique means, but we do have at least a couple characters that can kind of do some really interesting things with pushes, and the first one that comes up is AncientOne, actually. So AncientOne doesn't have any way of pushing a enemy character on her turn. There is nothing on any of these attacks that's going to be giving any shoves out, but we have the Winds of Watum here. So when AncientOne is targeted by an attack, can use this superpower to push the attacking character towards its small. And this is good for a couple reasons. Obviously, the first one being you get into martial artist range. The second one being having that character pushed means they could potentially take damage. So if they're on low health, that's a kind of a second reason for them to think twice about attacking AncientOne. And also, of course, if our idea is kind of to be chipping them down with these sorts of things, it works for that as well. So yeah, AncientOne, not a character I expected to be in this list, but I think being one of the only characters who can push enemies outside of activation is really, really interesting for this list. Not having a push on her own turn is definitely a downside, but that is what it is. We're not going to be able to make it perfect, so yeah, it's still, I think, really, really cool inclusion for this, and yeah, just in my opinion, a interesting piece. The next character we're going to be looking at, who has means of pushing enemy characters outside of his own turn, is going to be the Blob here. And Blob works really well for this list, definitely even better than AncientOne does, because he's got the strike with the wild push here. He's got Thunderous Splash with the explosive force, potentially pushing a bunch of characters, giving you some options for which one you want to take the damage. And they already take a damage from it, so really just that really makes that hurt a lot, and those are 2 instances of 1 damage too, so that can be really good for things like characters with damage reduction, that only go to a minimum of one, of course. That's going to be really, really good for that. So yeah, I think those are obviously really, really good right out the gate. But then you also have the ha 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 that tickles. So when you take damage from an attack, you get to reduce the damage and then push the attacking character small, and of course that'll be able to deal damage with them. So yeah, I think Blob is kind of a no-brainer for a list like this. He just seems really, really good here. And with that, we're already at 5 characters. So now I think it's time to start looking at just kind of other characters who can push reasonably effectively. Alrighty, so while I was scrolling through trying to think of some of the pushiest characters that we could put into lists, I had a interesting, in my opinion, idea for Neymar here. So Neymar does have the ability to push characters with his octopus grasp here, and in a similar vein to Blob's Spender, it's also going to be dealing a damage to those characters. So again, you kind of get to double up on that, which definitely feels good. But that is on a 3-cost attack, so he's not necessarily doing that every turn. The main reason why I like Namor here is also his tactics card, his Prince's Protection, which is going to push the enemy character towards him after their attack is resolved, because it's kind of like a Heroes for Hire style effect. He jumps in front of an attack for an ally, and then assuming he survives, he gets to push them towards him. So yeah, it's kind of just another character who can do that out of activation push, and I didn't think we were going to have any more of those. I'm almost definitely missing one or two of them, because there's probably at least a couple in the game. But yeah, I think he's at least interesting there. Now, I do have a strong temptation to give him the Time Stone in this roster, because that allows him to have that Spender online every turn, and that is a guaranteed push off the Spender, which does feel pretty good. So I think I'm going to go ahead and give him that Time Stone. I think that feels mostly fine. We do have a 5-threat leader, so throwing a 6-threat in there is definitely on the rougher side, but he doesn't need to be in every game piece. He is just, kind of an interesting one, and I think having the stone is going to fit the theme just that little bit better for the purposes of this video. All right, and apparently there are way more of these characters than I thought there were, because there's also Claw here, who has the ability to push characters out of his activation with the Soundwave Barrier when enemy characters end their activation within 3. So I think what's going to end up happening here is we're going to have too many of these types of characters in the roster, and we're going to trim it down at the end, because, yeah, there's way more of these than I thought there were, because once again, unfortunately, Claw doesn't have any pushes on his own attacks, so this is the only way he's pushing characters, but it's potentially really, really good. So yeah, I think we'll throw him there, but he's probably on the chopping block because he's also competing for that higher threat slot, and it's not going to be as consistent of a, he's only going to get to do it if your opponent walks into it, and yeah, that doesn't feel quite as good as having one on his own turn, which is of course in a similar vein to Ancient One. But being the 5-threat, I think, is probably going to make the difference there. But we'll include him for now, and we'll cut things down at the end. And starting to get into the characters who actually do the pushing on their own turn, we're going to be taking a look at Sam here. And Sam makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, for this list. He's got the Ricochet on this shield that does a push if he deals damage, and that means he can potentially go for that push up to 4 times in a turn. He's got the charge, so he's going to be able to do that fairly consistently, or at least two times fairly consistently. And then if he's getting those wilds, maybe more. So potentially a lot of different options to push a lot of different characters in the same turn. And in general, he's just a really, really good model. So yeah, I think Sam makes a lot of sense to earn a spot on this roster here. I am going to give a real quick honorable mention to Hulkbuster here. I really wanted to include Hulkbuster in the list, and when I first made it, he was an auto-include in my opinion. But as I've been kind of actually building this out, I'm realizing that we have a lot of high-threat characters, and even though we're probably cutting Claw, I still don't think we can justify a second 6 with Namor in here. Maybe we bump Namor down to not being with a stone. It's a hard call. I think I'm going to do the same kind of thing I did with Claw, where I'm going to put him in the list, but he's definitely on the chopping block when we inevitably go over characters here. The other Iron Mans both also have pushes, so they would be acceptable substitutes, but they're not guaranteed pushes, and obviously the extra consistency there is really, really good. So yeah, I think we put Hulkbuster in for now, but we'll see if he gets to stay. In a similar vein, we do have Magneto, who's also got guaranteed pushes if he's within or if he's not within two of the target character on his attacks here. And again, that's really really good for something like this. But he's a sixth threat, and I think between the two of them, Hulkbuster is probably the better choice for this one. So we're gonna put him there for now, but we'll see if that sticks. The next character we're going to be looking to include here is actually Ghost Spider, and I think Ghost Spider is really, really cool for a list like this. She can push through the impact webbing, which she can attempt twice per turn, and if she doesn't get the push there and she really, really wanted to do that one free damage to someone, she can then use the web line to pull any character she wants, and she kind of has the flexibility there. You know, if you really want her doing her spider technique or freestyle beatdown attacks, she can be doing those, and then just using webline to get that extra little bit of push damage in where you may need it. So yeah, I think she's a really interesting character for a list like this. She's got a few different ways to push characters. For what it's worth, she can also push allied characters, but that's not particularly helpful in this case. So yeah, I mean, Lifesaver is just a good ability, so having someone like that definitely doesn't hurt, but it's not really why we're bringing her. She just has a lot of ways of pushing people, and the other kind of fun thing is Webline is, yeah, Webline isn't once per turn. A character can only be affected by it once per turn. Doesn't matter because the leadership is once per turn, but again, just kind of giving us more options to kind of say, hey, we're going to pull this character forward, and you know, maybe we don't actually want to damage them, so instead we can plink this other guy as well. But now that character's in a position where we get to maybe use one of our other out of activation abilities on them and things like that. So yeah, maybe lines up some cool plays, but yeah, I just think she makes a lot of sense here, really. Another character who can push other characters in really interesting ways is Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi doesn't actually have a push on either of his attacks, but he has the 5 elements fist here where it's basically on his attack. He can pay 1 power after the attack to use one of these effects. And one of the effects is choosing an enemy character within 2 and of size 3 or less and pushing it away small. If it hits a terrain feature, it's going to gain the stun condition, and with our leadership, it's going to take a damage. And this becomes really, really interesting with this because, I mean, it's already a really, really useful, really, really powerful ability to have because you don't actually have to push the target. So you can attack an enemy character and then look at their remaining health and say, hey, that 1 extra damage drops them. Cool, we'll take that, we'll take them out. Or maybe say, okay, well, that 1 extra damage really isn't going to mean that much. We're going to have to punch them again. That other character, though, we can push them and we can damage them, or we can hold our push and wait and do it on the second attack or something like that. And, you know, kind of it gives us some extra options there on how we want to do our targeting with that. So kind of a similar vein to Gwen there. But yeah, I think Shang-Chi makes a lot of sense in a list like this, and honestly, most lists these days. And weirdly enough, I think we're basically happy with this where we are. I mean, obviously we're at 11, so we're going to have to cut someone. But in terms of adding other characters to this, I was kind of looking at my options, and I think there's a few kind of worth mentioning. Venom, obviously for a similar reason as Gwen, just having that web snare that can be used multiple times in a turn is really, really good. You've got characters like Toad, just to have a 2 threat that can push characters is also meaningful in its own way. You've got stuff like 4 threat Spider-Man, where I know he doesn't really see much play, but he can kind of perform very, very similarly to Gwen. As a matter of fact, he can do, for the purposes of this list, basically everything Gwen can, but at 4 threat, and, you know, he's a little bit bulkier for that and things like that. So there is some value to that there as well, but, you know, I don't think he's worth replacing Gwen over, and I don't think he's going to kick out any of these other characters here. So yeah, we have some other kind of interesting ones. Omega Red, exact same as Venom. Red Guardian's neat. He's got the size 3 or less automatic push, but it's only on a range 2 attack. I didn't love that part of it. So that's kind of the thing stopping me from including him there. Nova's got a fairly consistent push on his attack here, but again, that 5 threat, we have enough high threats in this list, and there was more that I wanted to add, trust me. I mean, we're coming up on the Hulks, and of course Hulk would have been great for a list like this, but again, we don't need another 6 threat. Dormammu, funny enough, would have been really, really good if it didn't force him to be the leader, because Feel the Power of Darkness, pushing characters away whenever they attack him, turns out would be really, really nice for something like this. So yeah, like that would be cool. Doctor Strange, again, high threat, but if he deals damage, push them, fairly consistent. Daredevil would be interesting, something like the Spender, where you can push a bunch of characters at once, or the Bedhot Hook, where you could potentially push one character with that. Again, lots of really, really cool options for this type of list, But I think at this point it's time we start trimming down things. And honestly, I'm looking at this list and I'm kind of happy with some of the characters I was a little bit more on the fence about. Like I actually really liked the inclusion of Hulkbuster here, and I think because of that, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take the stone off Neymar. I know there was a reason we gave it to him, and that was to allow him to use his spender more, but realistically, I think he's fine. He doesn't need it. And we're going to then cut Claw from the list. I think Claws is fairly consistent and probably better for the list overall than Ancient One is, but I think we just have enough higher threat characters. And if we cut Ancient One, then our only four is Shang-Chi, and I mean, that doesn't feel bad because Shang-Chi is also just really good. It's hard to say. The other thing we got to keep in mind is just kind of threat levels, right? So this is a 12 threat core. If we get 15, we're taking one of the threes, and we got a wealth of choice for that. If we get 16, we have to take one of the fours. And I mean, Shang-Chi is fine there. Ancient One will be fine there as well. Going up from that, we go into 17 threat where we have to take a 5 because we're not putting a 2 in here. So that's got to be either Namor or Claw. And 17 is the threat level we're going to see a lot. And most of the 17 maps are a little bit more on the spread out side, where I think they both actually work better in clumped scenarios. So it's really hard to say here. Um, I don't know. Maybe it is Ancient One that gets cut here. Maybe it is Ancient One. Um, I think Claw would work better. I don't even know if that's true, but I think Claw might work better if you're doing something like the Deadly Meteors, where it is going to be a little bit more clumped up. Whereas if you're doing something like Infinity Formula, then Namor is probably the pick. Deadly Meteors is 17, right? I'm not losing my mind. I think so. Um, but I'm really only seeing the one scenario for Claw, and I think Namor's good there too. And honestly, I just think Ancient One's really cool for this list. So yeah, no, that's it. That's Claw. He's cut. I think Namor's better for the list, and it's actually a little bit of a letdown that at 17 we have to include a character that has no way of pushing outside of their spender and a tactics card. I guess that doesn't feel too bad, but it is what it is. Then at 18, we have slightly more options. It's 2-3 threats, and we've got, or yeah, it's 2-3 threats or Hulkbuster. And we've got 3 threes, so that feels all right. And then yeah, we're fine after that point, because then it's a 3 and a 4. We can't do a 5 and a 2. We didn't give ourselves that option, but I do like the 3 and the 4 better with Shang-Chi and an Ancient One being options. And then it's either a 3 and a 5, or 2 4s, which yeah, having 2 4s actually gives us more options there. So yeah, I'm selling myself on this more and more as we go. So I think that's going to be our 10 characters. This was a tough decision. I'm definitely curious to hear what you guys might have included and said. So definitely yell at me down below if there's obvious characters that I'm missing, because I'm sure there are plenty of great options for something like this. And this is kind of my first crack at a list like this. So I'm not really expecting it to be perfect first try. Alrighty, so going into tactics cards here, first things first, we're going to take the one we've already mentioned, which is going to be Prince's Protection. That's part of why we're bringing Namor. So yeah, I think that one kind of just makes a lot of sense. Then we're going to start looking at our restricted cards here. We do still want to fill both of those slots. Now, unfortunately, none of these restricted cards are going to help us too much with our objective, with the slight exception of Sacrifice. Being able to push attacks into Ancient One or Blob, and push their push. Just feels like it could be really, really good for something like this. So we're going to go with Sacrifice there, and I think Brace is basically just stapled to every roster at this point. So yeah, that's going to be our 2 restricteds. From there, we're going to start looking at Wakanda cards, and first one we want to include, of course, is going to be Wakanda Forever. That is more opportunities to push characters, outside of the activation of the character doing the push. So that can be really nice with some of our characters that aren't going to be as consistently doing it on their own turn. Use Wakanda Forever to kind of make up for that lost damage potential there. So yeah, Wakanda Forever makes a lot of sense here. I'm going to go through the other ones and kind of see if any of them are jumping out at me. Alrighty, so none of the cards are really jumping out at me as particularly on theme for being able to generate more pushes. That said, Vibranium Shielding is a really, really good card, and we are running both Panther and Shuri, so it makes a lot of sense to bring that along. I'm also considering Wisdom of the Ancestors here, partially because Panther is our leader, and obviously we don't want him to go down super often. So there's a good argument to include that here, just for the defensive side of it, and of course letting him hit harder is always good. So yeah, I'm tempted by that one. I'm not 100% sure. We'll see what we're kind of looking at as we go into character cards. So yeah, I'm going to take a look at those real quick. First things first, we're bringing Shang-Chi, so we probably want Chi Mastery, and we are bringing him in a decent amount of the different threat levels we could be playing at. So yeah, I think that's just a decent call for this list. From there, I think we're looking probably at taking one of Tony's cards here, either Stark Armory or Helios Laser, and I'm going to lean towards Helios Laser, and the reason why I like Helios Laser here is if we're bringing Tony, I believe it's only at 18 threat with Tony, M'Baku, Shuri, and King T'Challa, and King T'Challa and Tony himself are going to be really, really good at generating a lot of power, so those two pretty much by themselves can fuel that card pretty effectively, and yeah, I think it just makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I'm picking that over Stark Armory here. I don't want to give him two cards because that just feels like way too much for a character that only comes at one threat level, but it's going to be a really good card when he does hit the table. With only 3 slots left and none of the other character cards really jumping out at me as all that necessary for this type of list, I think we're good to go ahead and include Wisdom of the Ancestors here. I think it's fine. We're not going to need that many, and with 3 of our cards being Wakandan cards and 2 of our cards being restricted, we're not restricted by the characters we brought in the roster anyways, so we can kind of afford to have only 2 kind of generic cards here. As far as those generic cards go, we have a few options. I mean, Warpath is just generically good, so that one is definitely worth considering. Survival, kind of same deal. Recalibration Matrix, same idea. None of them, as far as I'm aware, and I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing anything here, but none of them, as far as I'm aware, are going to be helping with our goal of pushing characters. Versatile Strategy could be really interesting because we are playing M'Baku, but I don't think we're going to go that route. I think we're going to take Warpath because I love Warpath and it's really good. If we had Killmonger, Survival would be a must, but because this is a Wakanda list without Killmonger, that feels weird, I know. We're going to be leaving Survival at home here. And yeah, from there, it's probably Recal. I'm going to think on this for a second. Yeah, I think it's going to be Recal here. I think Recal just makes a lot of sense for this one. And yeah, it's just going to be all around a solid card as it usually is. So yeah, that's our 10 cards. I am pretty happy with those. So we'll go ahead and move on to Crises. All right, so there's a couple things we want to consider with Crises. First of all, that we are going to be very push focused. So we're going to be quite good at playing the kind of more, what's the wording I'm looking for? Secure is where we're going to get a lot of advantage out of that. We don't necessarily want the ones that are going to be doing kind of some of that for us because that's going to be then we're getting pushed and that's not good. So stuff like I think it's Black Order Descends where it's pushing us. We don't want that. We don't want to go that far into it. But I think we also want to kind of stick towards the higher threat levels. So we want to avoid some of the lower ones because we have more flexibility. That said, I do really like our 15s. We do have great 15 options, so I think that's worth considering as well. We probably avoid pay to flips because pushing characters off of those is not quite as impactful. So like Sword is probably out, but I'm actually making a serious consideration for Researcher here because a list where pretty much every character in the list has some way of pushing you is really good on Researcher. So I'm considering it. My only concern on Researcher is how good we are at pushing characters that are bigger than size 3, because we definitely got a few of those limits. And like King T'Challa was size 3, M'Baku is any size, so that helps. Shuri is size 3, that's going to be a thing. And then our 3 threat options, Blob could be any size. Okay, that helps. Explosive Force, not so much on strike, but that still helps. And then Sam is going to be limited to size 3, or size 2 for the push, size 3 for the slow, or the throw. And then Gwen actually works all right for this as well, because Webline can be any size. So I don't hate that. I don't love it. The 15 is definitely going to be a little rough if we go up against like a kind of typical kaiju list. But honestly, it's probably one of the better ones for us here. I'm not sure. Because we'd have to cut a restricted card as well, and no, I really like Sacrifice, and I'm not cutting Brace, so no, we can't do Researcher as much as I want to. So from there, I think we're looking mostly at 19 and 20 threat scenarios as kind of our preferred area there, and we don't want anything too crazy advantaging one specific type of team. So, we like I said, we don't want to bring stuff like Cosmic Invasion or Spider Infected, because I don't think we're going to be able to play those super well against more objective focused teams. So from there, I think Deadly Legacy Virus just makes a lot of sense. Being 19 is really good for us. So I like that a lot. At 18, we know we're bringing Hulkbuster, so I actually kind of like hammers for that because he can just pick it up right out the gate, and Hulkbuster with a hammer is kind of terrifying, so kind of down for that. From there, as much as I'm not personally a fan of it, we do have some really good models for Skrulls, so I think we probably just take Skrulls because at 20 we can do Sam and Namor, and we can have a safe grab for both. Oh, I guess King T'Challa could safe grab the middle one, so we don't actually need Sam for that, but still, we have good options for both. So I think we'll go there. And then when we get into secures, I do like the idea. Oh man, Gamma is risky. Gamma is risky for the same reason Research Station is. I like it. We're gonna do it because I like Gamma. But is that the right call? Maybe not. Hard to say 100%. But yeah, we're going to include it. From there, I'm not 100% sure. I think cover from Scoundrels is interesting. We're pushing them off, so they won't be benefiting for long. Okay, yeah, I think I like that. And 20 threats, so we like the threat. Demons is not great for us, I'm going to lean towards. Being on fire is going to kind of mitigate the extra damage that we might have over the enemy team from the leadership, so I think we're going to pass on demons. Intrusions is cool. Actually, I really like intrusions because we can push them off of those points, and then we get all of these benefits of extra mobility from being able to teleport through them. But they still have to walk to get back onto the point or use abilities and things. So I actually really like intrusions here. That seems like it could work for me. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going with that. So I'm pretty happy with this overall. I think this is a neat spread. Again, mostly leaning towards those higher threat objectives. The only low threat objective we have is Gamma. I didn't love our variety of options at 16 and 17, so I very intentionally avoided those threats. And 18 actually same deal. I just hammers is fun, and Hulkbuster having a hammer is even more fun. So we included that as well. But yeah, that's going to be the whole roster. So real quick, we'll go and overview things. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out. Alrighty, and here we have the roster all completed. So for our Wakandan characters, we of course have King T'Challa leading the charge. With him, he has Shuri and M'Baku, and these three are going to be in, I think they have to be in every game. I guess at 15. Oh, I love this for 15. We could do King T'Challa, M'Baku, and Hulkbuster if we're worried about a kaiju matchup. And I actually really like that. I did put Gamma in. Oh, this is fantastic. Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, perfect. Anyways, as I was saying, for characters that can push outside of their own activation, we have AncientOne, Blob, and Namor. And then for characters that do all the pushing during their activation, we got Captain America Sam Wilson, Hulkbuster, Ghost Spider, and Shang-Chi. From there, we got Team Tactics cards, where, first of all, for our Restricteds, we have Brace and Sacrifice. For our Wakandan cards, we have Wakanda Forever. Wisdom of the Ancestors is not actually a Wakanda card, that's a character card. And Vibranium Shielding. And then for character cards, well, we have Wisdom of the Ancestors, Helios Laser Bombardment, Chi Mastery, and Prince's Protection. And then we got a couple generics in there as well, Warpath and Recalibration Matrix. Yeah, pretty good spread of cards there. We got plenty of options at many different threat levels, so happy to see that. Then we go into Crises, where we have Deadly Legacy Virus, Fear Grips World as Worthy Terrorized Cities, and Scrolls for our extracts. And we got Gamma, Superpowered Scoundrels, and Intrusions for Secures. Yeah, overall, I'm really happy with the way this came out. I was not confident at all during the character selection, but then as we got into tactics cards and crises, and just here at the end realizing that wait a minute, we can do three models at 15. Suddenly I'm feeling a lot better about this. This actually seems like it would be really fun, and I might have to try this out either for Battle Report or at locals or something like that because yeah, I mean, I've got to get a couple models painted up to play this list, but it seems like it would be a lot of fun. So, yeah, I definitely hope you guys have enjoyed this roster building episode. That's basically going to do it for me, but definitely let me know what you guys think down below, what kind of characters you might have included that I didn't. Definitely call me out if there are some obvious ones that I missed. Very, very interested to hear what you guys are thinking. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. So I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Helps me out a bunch. Lets me know you guys are enjoying the stuff we're throwing out here. But that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, have a great day, everybody. Peace.